Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's a Saturday morning here in Minnesota. It's actually quite a pleasant morning. It's probably mid-60s. Humidity's kind of dissipated right now. The scent of fall is in the air, and probably some Canadian wildfire smoke as well. We had some air issues the last few days. But a question I got for people, and respond in the comments, let me know. It's kind of a good measuring stick, I think, to get to know somebody through music. And often what they listen to is very informative and telling, but equally important, I think, and sometimes not as often considered, is how important is music to you? Not just one thing or one genre, or what I listen to reveal about me, but how important in general is music to you in your life. And I think everybody has a different experience with art, and music is kind of a omnipresent thing in everyone's life. You can't be in many places and not hear something. Is it something you're always digesting? Is it something you kind of are blocking out a lot of the time? Are you narrow in your scope of what you love and listen to, or is good? If it's a melody and you can kind of snap your fingers and tap your foot, is that, you know what I mean? There's a lot of different ways you can look at this. But I certainly, as a DJ, have learned to read people by what they're responding to. Just in terms of in order for me to know what to keep playing and how to take the direction of any given night, the people are going to have a large say as to what direction the music goes and even how loud the music's going to be. A crowd that the music's not that important to, which you do find them sometimes, they hire you for an event, but they just felt obligated to put a DJ there, and they're not really into nothing. The music's... So you just stay background, and it means that nothing you play matters in a way. So you can put anything on almost and just kind of almost relax. In a way, it's kind of a freebie. You're getting paid to put background color out there. But I've also done events where the wedding couple or whatever it was were very passionate about what the music was going to be, and there actually can be a pressure with that as well. Although oftentimes a bride or a groom will say this is what the music has to be, but then they have no concept of really they're following their audience, and that can often change the course of that very dramatically. You know, they'll realize quickly like no one's moving or dancing because I'm playing these three bands you like. You can't really do it that way if you want people to have a good time. Self-indulgence is not an aspect of DJing very often. I can only self-indulge myself maybe once an hour, something I really want to hear, and that still has to fit to me in the context. But DJing has really allowed me to learn how to read an audience and get to know what people are responding to and how important music is to them. And so I think, obviously, most of you are here because music's probably quite important to most of you. That's an assumption I'm willing to take right now. There's not a lot of people sitting down watching Jazz Shepherd talking about deep jazz issues from the 1950s and 60s here in 2021. That's a bystander musically and doesn't really have an interest or stake in it. Obviously, most of you are going to be fairly proficient, knowledgeable, and passionate music people. But all the same, just in a small sentence, how important is music to you? And I'm going to share a little bit about my life. I've shared a few things of this before, but I was born and raised in Canada until I was 17. Born and raised in the Toronto area. But then we moved out to Manitoba, south of Winnipeg, on the flat prairie, to a very Mennonite community. My parents were evangelical, holy roller Christians that were far exceeding the balance of the religious experience of these Mennonite people, who were much more traditional and stoic with their relationship with God, as it were. And we kind of grafted our way in, but things went south, And next thing you know, we were kind of a cult leader family, and I had a lot of troubles in school. A lot of troubles in school in the 5th and 6th grade, going to school every day, getting beat up because you are the cult kid, you know, with the funny haircut and the home done everything. You know, it was a growing experience, and a lot of it shaped who I've become. A lot of it's changed my dynamic with not just religion, not just nation, community, but just it's made me seek purpose and meaning in life in a way where if I have to go through this, I want to know what's the point, what's the purpose. And my creator couldn't just be revealing himself to one people, one nation, one creed, one race. My creator has to be revealing himself to all people and love all of his creation. I have the world tattooed on my arm because that's the club I'm a member of. But going through those hard times, there's things you latch onto. It could be writing, it could be painting, which I did some of that as well. But for me, music was a partner that rode with me, ride or die style, my whole life. And it would be a fool's mission for me to try to tell you that music wasn't the most important thing in my life, because it is. Music has been at my side through thick and thin, good times and bad. It never really fails you or lets you down. And in some ways, it's become my spirituality, my religious experience is with music. There's a genuine sincerity in the music I love. And sincerity ends up being my ultimate measuring stick. But that sincerity, that honesty that I get from a Bob Marley or a John Lennon or a Bob Dylan or a John Coltrane, I crave that honest expression of my experience. I can't digest very well the marketing and mass messaging that comes across in so many of the things that proves to be the impetus behind it. The fake, the phony, the plastic, the insincere. So much of it is brought to us by a message of consuming, a message of control, a message of fear. I need honesty. I crave honesty. I need to have a belief in something. And music's been one of the few things in life that hasn't disappointed. And is there phony music? Of course. But you can still find honesty in music. You can still find someone willing to tell you what they really think. Thank you, Rage Against the Machine. Thank you, Bob Marley. In the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty, Bob Marley says. So in the land of everything, how can you still be so unhappy? It's an interesting piece of insight in a very simple way. He concocts things very simply. Marley to me is one of the great wordsmiths of all time. He's just so natural and effortless in how he says things that make you think. You know, and that's in essence the why this art form is important to me. And jazz comes along now. As I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I start dabbling. You know, you do the Bitches Brew, and you learn about some of the Silent Way and some Herbie Hancock stuff, and you're diving a little deeper, and you get, you know, Kind of Blue and some early John Coltrane. And jazz to me was sophisticated, and it was about how, listen how great these musicians are, and I didn't really get it until I felt it. And it was when I felt it that Lee Morgan break on John Coltrane's Locomotion. It's just like he's kicking the door down and saying, man, fuck today. It's been a hard, long morning for me. I got pissed on by my dog. The bus rode by and splashed me. My trumpet's wet. Morgan doesn't, it was like an epiphany, like, oh, these cats can be telling me something. Of course they are. They're emoting. They're improvising emotion. Which, when you think about that, what could be more honest than somebody's soul not reading a script, but sharing an experience that's immediate? It's my insight into my life today, right now, in the most honest context I can feed it to you. And that was a real eye-opener. And as that transition starts happening in my comprehension of what jazz is and what jazz means and how it feels and what it's supposed to represent, I was also simultaneously DJing more and more, back in 2005, 2010, 2012, 2015, more and more in the black community. I was getting to know that black community better and better and better, to the tune of hundreds, if not thousands of people. It's a pretty big community in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I was one of the preeminent DJs in that community. So we had this big following, people coming out to hear this stuff, and I was learning it and playing it. And of course, the deeper you go, the more your knowledge goes. It took a few years before I wasn't getting requests for songs I didn't know. The first few years, it was a couple songs. Oh, I don't know what that is. I'll have to check that out. You know, and you learn what Cutie Pie is, and you learn what Funky for Jamaica is, and you learn all these deeper tracks that are by artists you don't know, and you keep digging and finding that vinyl, and I just keep collecting and buying it. And of course, in the 90s, I was into hip-hop and rap with Dre and Snoop, and not so much Pac, even though I love Pac now. But I was listening to some rap, and rap was seen to be something that was going to be a fun thing retro to play at the club, like Gin and Juice. I always got a good response. And as you dig deeper into hip-hop and you see some of the messages coming from Ice Cube and Ice-T and Rakim and the entire Eric B, you know, all those guys had things to say. KRS-One, you know, and of course, most importantly, Public Enemy, Chuck D. When you recognize those emotions and feelings that these men were saying through this honest kind of underground format, because rap was still very much underground as this process was gestating. So the honesty didn't have to be compromised. It's when it became mainstream where the honesty, what I feel, had to be somewhat watered down, and now I'm suddenly selling you wristwatches, shoes, and jet skis. That's not really, again, the honesty shifts, the integrity shifts. But these musicians in the early days of hip-hop were just repeating what the great soul singers have said of the 60s and 70s. And I've said this many times on the channel. And so when you realize what the soul cats were saying in the 60s and 70s, what Stevie Wonder had to say, what Marvin Gaye has to say, what Curtis Mayfield has to say, Isaac Hayes, what those guys were saying in the music, Gil Scott-Heron, that has to transition into the next generation of kids in rap, but also backwards into the same earlier generation of musicians in the black community that were in jazz in the 50s. And so I suddenly realized that these guys also must be expressing from that place of integrity how they feel about their place in the world. And how could it be any different, if not more intense, than the experience of a guy who's more liberated than like a Marvin Gaye or a Chuck D? All this to breed Kanye West. Maybe this wasn't all worth it, wasn't, guys? But the sacrifice these guys have made and the things they had to say, and then being watched by the government, FBI, being put on lists because they were saying things that were socially charged and had impact on economics and cultural activity in this country. This is real stuff these guys were dealing with. These jazz cats were the first to really take that fist and raise it in the air and march through the door opened up by that first generation of jazz cats. I mean, Louis Armstrong brought music into our homes and the black experience. Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, they bring jazz into the white American home. And it's enough to have got through that door to earn them a place of status in this kingdom. But the next generation wants to push it a little further with Parker and Gillespie and Max Roach. And the next generation wants to take it even further. And eventually jazz morphs into other things. But the integrity of jazz, that's what speaks to me. The honest angst and begrudging sorrow of Miles Davis' tone. I don't think I would like to hang out with the guy, but I could definitely relate to his honesty. He doesn't think he should have to live the way he's being forced to live. I agree with you. Coltrane's honest seeking for evidence of truth, evidence of spirituality, proof of my purpose and meaning. I'm with you, John. I'm following you. I'm going to pick up everything you put down because I'm kind of on that same quest for some understanding. And it comes across in those Blue Note 1500 records I talk about a lot, from 57 and 58, this aggressive, we're not going to take it. And we're not talking Twisted Sister with a pledge pin on your uniform. We're not talking the anger of Nirvana. We're talking the revolution of a Moses leading his people out of the bondage into the promised land. That's the message of jazz. It was a freeing, liberating place, not only to physically dance and find happiness and joy now, and it does liberate in that sense. Ellington and Armstrong's music liberate, basically it's liberating them with the joy of the swing and the sensuality of it all, the pulse of it, the groove of it. You can't help but get, oh baby, you looking good with that hip shake. There's a freedom in that. That's very empowering and very important. But the freedom of those next couple generations really speaking into their horns. He gave that music a magic and a power that was tactile. I could suck into it and recognize what year did this come out? What was the state of things? What region is this being recorded in? What's the racial content of this group? What label is recording this group? Are they having time to rehearse those emotions and get them tight and precise? Or is it just kind of loosely slapped together so a bunch of junkies can go get high? All those things impact what a session is going to say to you. So you have to listen with your heart, but you still got to think with your brain and be, okay, this is 4 guys who showed up at Prestige one day to make a jam record outskirts of town. There's not a real commonality and sense of purpose in these guys, aside from I want to get paid and go get high. And I'm not saying outskirts of town was one of those sessions, but Prestige was known for just whoever showed up, put them in the studio, let them record, they can get paid, and that's what they were doing. So a lot of those kind of sessions that weren't really led by anyone particular are kind of from those type of dates. So you can measure the sincerity of a record and how much honesty they're able to propel by understanding the context of not just the history, but the entire record industry and the racial makeup of the time frame that the record was made in. And the 50s, the segregation was still very much real. And the blackness of Blue Note is very stark compared to most other labels. And there's the guys at the West Coast who can swing their butts off can never still have that punch. And so, about what I feel, that's the entire measuring stick for music that I love. When Bob Dylan is in a place, my hair stands on it. When Neil Young is gutting it, just bleeding himself, okay, I'm with you. I want to gut myself some days too. When John Lennon's crying "Mother," talking about God, imagine all the. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's worth talking about. Let's consider those things. And so integrity for me has always been this most important of measuring sticks. Even before I kind of recognized it, it was still the music I was always drawn to. Sincerity. And sadly, a band like Led Zeppelin for me, on some level, it's because of the mysticism and the black magic and the song lyric content. As wonderful as Zeppelin is, and I love their catalog, there's a level of integrity that's not the same with Led Zeppelin. And to me, the greatest bands in the world are usually a band that has a great songwriter and a talented understander of writing songs, like McCartney, and then a guy like John who's more about feeling. And I've always said every great band has a player and a writer, because most musicians aren't both. Most musicians either are a guy who writes songs and needs people around him to play them with him, or he's other players. And often the greatest players don't really write. They just kind of play other people's songs and embellish them and make them incredible, but they're not really known for being writers. And I feel like there's that other context too, of whether you can be a musician, excellent, stylized, and then you have that guy that brings some soul and spirit and gut, and that really can balance and make the whole thing feel something. I used to be able to feel a lot of the white metal, a band like Pantera, but now some of that angst seems a little processed and seems a little bit unnecessary. What are you so upset about, Pantera? As Butthead once said, you've been a bad Pantera. Of course, as you get older, people's politics as they get older can also sour your relationship with some of this stuff. So again, simply, what does music make you feel, and how important is music to you? For me, it's the top of the mark. It's the one thing I can submerge myself in and not feel tainted by the world. If I play the right stuff. And that's part of the problem with pop music and a lot of the rock music. I end up feeling part of the world, part of, a timeline that I can't. I'm very limited in that space, and I like music that lets me escape one single paradigm, lets my mind wander, and lets my thoughts and my feelings gut check. Which is why jazz has become my most dominant form of music. I just think it's an incredible art form, and for me, music stands tall above. And again, my life kind of revolves around it. Between DJing, being in bands for years, this cafe is going to be very music oriented. It's always been what I do is feel music, and I think that's what makes me a very well respected DJ in this area, is because I can really feel people and feel music and make it feel. I can build an energy in the room by making people comfortable, making people happy, making people hear stuff they want to hear, make them feel like they're part of the process and not beneath me. You have to bring them in and make them feel like they're knowledgeable and they know stuff. And I think you like this, I'm going to play it, I like that too. See, now we're on the same level. And now you're going to open your ears and your heart to what else I have to show you, what else I have to play. And you might not only like a few genres, but because I've acknowledged the genres you like, you're more perceptive to the other things I'm going to play and show you that other people in this room are going to like as well. And you see them like it, and that validates that I like it, and then now you feel like, man, okay, maybe I do need to have some of that in my life. Maybe I do need some reggae. Maybe I do need some jazz. And that's honestly how I play jazz at this brunch gig. It's always been, I'll play you some modern stuff. I'll play you some classic hip-hop and some classic soul music. But I'm going to put some jazz in there too to give it a context. And if you trust me because I played that Flume, and if you trust me because I played that Alana Baraz, and if you trust me because I played, some Tribe Called Quest and some Stevie Wonder, maybe you can trust me when I play you some Horace Silver. And I've drawn young people into jazz through that process. So let me know, how important is music to you? Is it just something you do in your spare time, or is it something that, again, is also, do you feel different about the times when you're engaged versus when it's just background? There's times when I listen to a record and I know I didn't really hear it because I was doing stuff, and I know I didn't get it. I listened to it, but I didn't really hear it. And that's part of the process too, is knowing that the actual, when you're sitting there really digesting music, it really has a chance to do things differently and process differently than when you're busy typing out something and you're not really engaged in it. So share with me in the comments how you guys feel about your relationship with music. How important is it to you? Is television, movies, books, are they more important? Sports, activities, golfing? And there's no wrong answer. It's just honest. But where else in life can you find that honesty and integrity? I think religion's always failed me. Politics has always failed me. Government's always failed me. The media, I don't trust at all. The elite, I know what their agenda is always. At least I can see through what they're doing. They're always about making more money. But when you look for truth, it's hard to just believe what you're told, believe what you hear. But a musician coming from the gut, I'm like, okay, I don't even agree with you, but I respect your sincerity and your willingness to share it and your belief in what you're saying. And that has an importance to me. So respond to that. I got a couple more things I want to show you real quick. Now, if you asked me, cold and in the dark, what's my favorite Miles Davis record? I'd probably say Kind of Blue. I like Quiet Nights a lot, which is a weird choice. Around Midnight's fantastic. Cooking, Working, Steam, Relax. There's a lot of Miles Davis I really enjoy greatly. I tend to like the more jazz-oriented ones more than some of the crossover records he's done in different eras. But if I measure my favorite Miles Davis record by what I think is the right thing to say, the intellectual response, you get some of those answers. But if I measured what my favorite Miles Davis record is by which one do I listen to the most over the last 20 years, be Miles Davis ballads. And it's a strange choice. It's not really a record. It's something that was culled together by the Columbia executives probably in late 80s, early 90s, to put on the shelves, to market, because they owned all that Miles Columbia stuff. Let's put a collection of ballads out there for people to buy. And I bought this years ago, and most of the tracks come from 62, 63, if not all of them. And it's just the perfect, wonderfully melancholic expression of Miles Davis when he's in a more vulnerable place than he often was. And for me, when Miles Davis has a big name star in his group, like a Coltrane, like a Wayne Shorter, he has a bravado and he can hide behind his big name, you know. When he's vulnerable and exposed and doesn't have that big tenor chair filled, there's a side of Miles I really love, where he's a little bit more unsure of himself. It feels like it's a little bit more vulnerable. And the period between Coltrane and Shorter, he makes a half dozen records in there with varying lineups, trying to find that next formula. And slowly that second quintet comes together with Ron Carter and Hancock and Shorter and what did I miss? Tony Williams. Slowly that group comes together, and you get a few on this record, a few on that record, you get 3 on that record, and then ESP, the group's kind of now become that group, and it will be for about 4 years. But in that in-between period, Miles, he was struggling. His sales were down, his insecurities were up, his fear, his angers, his hates, his vulnerabilities. Miles, he's a vulnerable cat. That's what fuels a lot of his playing. And Miles' sound is that muted, melancholic, sour, just pained. I used to think he was a very sensual player, but now it seems more bitter, begrudging, and angry. And I've often said he's got a certain element of "fuck you, white boy, buy my record." You know, he knows that at Columbia that's part of the deal. So he's got to make records that white people will buy to be successful. And Sketches of Spain, you know, Porgy Bets, those are kind of evidence of that. He's trying to make that crossover and make that money and be successful. And Kind of Blue was a hard act to follow, obviously. So this record's taken mostly from Seven Steps to Heaven. I think 3 songs are from that. 2 or 3 songs are from The Quiet Nights, Gil Evans, kind of unfinished record that I actually like a lot. It's Miles doing bossa nova, but Miles kind of walks away from the project at one point, and it sounds like Gil Evans and Mateo Macero, one of the executives, helps kind of finish that record. Miles is unhappy about it coming out. It's not included in some box sets. Gil Evans' Quiet Nights. I love that record. And there's a song at the end of that record that's not bossa, it's with a different lineup. That song's outstanding too. I can't think of the name of it. Somewhere in the City, maybe, something like that. What a great track that is. But you got Seven Steps to Heaven, you got some stuff from Quiet Nights. I think the remaining track is from Friday Night at the Blackbird, the Blackhawk, Bye Bye Blackbird, sorry. But it's a go-to record for me. I played it for years. I'll play it when company comes over. I bring it to my gigs a lot. I play it almost any track in here I could play at an event. And at the worst, it's wonderful tea sipping, coffee drinking, jazz in the background. And it's at best a very melancholic, atmospheric thing that can really entice a room of people. So I would never have, ballads, but I love ballads. It's a go-to for me. I love that era of Miles, and he definitely changes his course once that second quintet comes into fruition. It's a whole different thing for Miles at that point. And the ballad and the beautiful and the melancholic kind of goes away, and he goes more into that trying to be hip with the kids kind of thing. And good for him. R. Kelly made trap records, unfortunately. Every generation kind of wants to keep the kids buying it because the kids drive the consumption of music. Older people don't buy music the same way. You need kids out there buying your 45s, buying your downloads to really propel your career and to make the dance floor hits that you need as an artist. So it's not a unique thing for anybody to say I need to keep contemporary on some level. And for Miles, I think that was very much a driving force. He was always insecure and didn't like to be seen as anything less than the preeminent name in jazz, which commercially he definitely has become that. So I'm going to leave it at that today. Miles Davis Ballads, one of my favorite records. And again, share in the comments, how important is music to you? And where does your process go? What are you thinking about when you listen to music? Is it part of your spirituality? Is it part of how you think, feel, and pray? Is it how you relate to humanity? Because I think that's, for me, that's kind of where it comes down to. When I need to relate to some other humans, I don't have to filter the message when I listen to someone's music. You know, when I listen to Fela Kuti, when I listen to just about anything I can think of, it's refreshing just to get that honest. So anyway, last thing I want to share is there's some cool new merch in the Jazz Shepherd merch store. Some of these hoodies here are for the new Jazz Shepherd coffee shop, which we're in the process of doing. Jazz Shepherd Coffee. If you purchase these, the money from this stuff from Patreon right now and from the Teespring store, this money will go to working on the building, and which is where a lot of the money's been going anyway from that. Again, I love this logo. Music and coffee. Nice adaptation of the logo. The coffee cups are also here. They're expensive, I think they're 16 bucks, and that's just how it works through the site. But again, you're not really buying just to have a cup of coffee. You're buying it to help support the cafe and the Message Jazz, and help it support me get this place open to the public so I can share with people about music and this great art form, and share my collection with whoever wants to come. So y'all be safe out there. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Delta virus be damned. We got to keep moving forward. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.